Hi, my name is Cheryl and I'm a crafty little chickie. Today I'm going to show you the tutorial for the Baymax Toque. This is for the big red character, or white before he had his armor on, in the Big Hero 6 movie. Okay, so we're going to need several different colors for this one. The majority of them you're going to use very little of that color. But your main color is going to be your red color. And this I used in Red Heart Super Saver, and it's cherry red. Okay, so then for the eyes area, red heart in white. Okay, then for the actual eyes themselves, I have a big ball of this because I use a ton of it, but this is red heart in black. I don't think it says it on the back anywhere. No, when you buy the big ones, they just do the E707D number. Alright, and another color that I seem to be using a lot of is this purple. And this is part of the ears, or part of the ear area piece. And that is in Red Heart, and it's a dark purple, and again I bought it in the big color, so all it is, well, this one is E707D, so no, it is 3231. Okay, and so you only just need a little bit of the purple. This will definitely be enough, just this pile that I have here. Okay, so those are the colors. You will need just one of each of those. The black, you could almost use scraps for. It's such a tiny little bit. The red, you'll just need the one skein for. That'll be more than enough for one toque. So that is the yarn that you're going to be needing for this tutorial. Okay, so the tools you're going to need in order to make this toque are, of course, starting with a crochet hook. For this one, I use, see if I can get the camera to pick up that. It's a 5 or an H crochet hook. Okay, and then you'll need a pair of scissors and a yarn needle. And for stitch markers, I use bobby pins, and I will be using 2. Most of the time you just use 1, but there's some points where you use 2. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so to start this toque, we are going to start with a magic circle. Okay, leave yourself a really long tail, and you wrap it over your pointing finger here, and then you're going to wrap it around your 2 middle fingers twice, like that. And then you're going to bring the 2 pieces together and then hold them together between your thumb and your pinky finger. And it's going to look like this. Okay, so then you're going to grab your crochet hook. You're going to bring it in between your 2 fingers in the middle. And you're going to yarn over in that piece that's behind your pointy finger. You're going to pull it through both of the pieces that are over your 2 middle fingers. Okay, and then you're going to do that again. You're going to yarn over from that same string and pull through. Then you can take your fingers out. This is what it will look like at this point. Okay, so you've got your yarn going back to the yarn ball. You've got your magic circle. You've got 1 loop on your hook. And this is your tail. All right, so we're going to single crochet 10 times into this magic circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it can be really awkward to do these ones because there's not much to hold on to, but just keep trying and you will get used to it. Okay, so then this is what it looks like right now at this point. Okay, the first thing you want to do is take out the tail piece. It's going to go between your, it's going to currently be between your 2 strings here. You want to pull that out. If you don't do that, it's going to get tangled up in when you're tightening it. And sometimes it doesn't tighten quite as good as it should if this is all tangled up in it. Okay, so you've got your tail off to the side. And you're going to want to pull one of these strings. It's almost always the front one for me. So you grab that one firmly, and you also grab your work firmly, and you're going to pull the string. And if it doesn't want to come right away, you know, give it a fairly firm tug. Okay, and then once you've done that as tight as you can, then you're going to go to the tail and you're going to pull on the tail and make sure you still hold on to your work. Okay, and you make that nice and snug, a nice hard pull, and there you are. There's absolutely no hole in between there. Okay, so you put your crochet hook back in your loop. You pull your yarn tighter again. Oh, that's my tail. It's kind of hard to tell because the tail gets really long, but make sure that's behind your work. Right, there you are. Right, the tail is firmly behind your work. And then you want to single crochet into your very first single crochet of the first round, right? Because you're going to start your second round now. So to make sure you're in the right one, you can count back. You can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It is this one right here. Right, you can go through there, yarn over and pull through and single crochet into that one. At this point, you want to put a stitch marker in because this is where we start marking our first stitch of each round. Okay, so then we're going to go around for this round 2. We're going to want to put 2 single crochets in each stitch. So we've already got 1 in the first stitch. We're going to go into that same stitch again. Oh, as my hook went in the wrong place. We're going to go in that same stitch and single crochet again. And we're going to do that for all the rest of the stitches. So we're going to go from 10 stitches in the previous round to 20 stitches in this current round. Okay, and sometimes it can be a little bit hard to see your stitches because it is all very jam-packed in there. Especially the darker the yarn, the harder it is to see. But just make sure you're being careful as to where you're putting your stitches and count to make sure you've gone from 10 to 20. Okay, and now the very last stitch in there. Okay, so now you have done the second round. And with my patterns of toques, you're going to be increasing every other round. And the rounds that you're not increasing is just single crochets in each stitch around. So I will be putting my increase chart on the next clip. So you can pause on that screen and you can follow it as you go along. And I'm going to be going until the end of round 14. And that is where I'm going to stop increasing, is on after I've finished round 14. So I will meet you on the very end of round 14. Okay, so this is what the pattern looks like at the end of round 14. Okay, you can see that it is starting to do that gentle dome, which is great for the top of the toque. So after this point, we're not going to be doing any more increase rounds. It's just going to be single crochets in every stitch around until you get to the length that you want. As mentioned in the chart in this previous clip, it mentioned that the amount of single crochet rows you'll have to do past this point entirely depends on how many increase rounds you did. If you were doing a toque preemie size or infant size, you would not need as many single crochets because they've got a much smaller head than, let's say, a youth, which is the pattern that I am almost going for. I think I'm going for age 5 to 7 at row 14. So it'll be a lot different in regards to how much longer you'll need to make it before it gets to the eyebrow area, right? So you can continue to do those rounds as long as you need to do. Feel free to Google it as well in regards to child head sizes, because then you can measure for circumference around and also for height of the toque as well. It's what I did when I first started crocheting, and it helped me immensely. It really did. So then, of course, remember that those are average statistics. Some kids have bigger heads than others, and some kids have smaller heads than others, but that is the average size. So what I'll do is I will continue to do my single crochets. I will be doing a total of 32 rows, starting from that very first row, and that's when I'll be finished, at least that part of the toque, and then I can meet up with you at that point and we can start on the ear flaps. All right. Okay, so I have finished till the end of row 32. That's as far as I would like to go in regards to depth of the toque. And the next thing I've done is I've marked off the spots where I want to have my ear flaps. Right, and the way that I do that is that I make it so that the end of my stitch is in the front but towards the left side. Okay. And what I have decided is that I wanted the ear flaps to be 18 stitches long. I found that's a good number of stitches for this size of toque. It covers just a tiny bit of the cheek on the side of the face without covering the eyes, but it also goes back and covers a little bit of the neck as well. And another part that I have found works well is that you put the front starting stitch of the ear flap about 4 stitches further towards the outside than the back. Okay, so this way it doesn't get too close to the eyes, still fully covers the ears, but it also covers a bit of the back, and it also allows it to tie up better underneath the chin when you put it with this design like this. All right, so we're going to start here because this is where we ended off our row. Okay. So rather than going in here, I'm just going to be starting my stitch right here and going back because this is 18 stitches starting from here till here. Okay, so I chain 1, I turn my work, and now I stitch for the next 18 stitches in single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 is just in the stitch where my bobby pin is. So 18. All right, now we're going to want to do the exact same thing, but going the other way, right? So we chain 1, and we go for 18 stitches. Because it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. All right. So the first one, make sure you go into that first stitch here, don't go into the second one. This is stitch number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and make sure you're counting your stitches just so that you don't miss this last stitch here. And this is 18. Okay, so we're going to want to do the same thing that we did for this last row here and for another 2 rows. So that means you have 4 rows past the edge of the toque that are all exactly the same. So your line goes straight up for 4 rows. I'll see you at the end of the 4th row of this ear flap. Okay, so we've done 4 rows all at 18 stitches past the edge of the toque here. Okay, so the next row is when we start to decrease, and we're going to do the same thing for each row past this point, but the stitches will be lessened every row because we're going to be doing a decrease at the beginning and at the end. All right, so of course we still do our chain 1 and we turn our work, and we're going to start off our very first stitch with a decrease stitch. So we go into this very first stitch, yarn over, pull through, and then you go into the very next stitch, yarn over, pull through. So now you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Now you're going to single crochet until you get to the last 2 stitches of your row. Okay, so these are your last 2 stitches left, right? There's one right there, and then one on the end here. You can always tell where there's that one stitch kind of going up and down. That is the very last stitch that you need to go into. So we're going to do the same thing that we did in the beginning. We're going to do a decrease stitch. So you go in, you yarn over, and then you go into that last stitch, yarn over and pull through. So now again you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Okay, so we'll do this for the rest of the rows until you've come to just the 2 decrease stitches, the first one and the last one. But I'll show you one more round. So I've already chained 1, turn your work, and this first stitch is going to become more obvious when there's a decrease stitch because it's 2 stitches pulled together. So we want to make sure you go into that stitch, yarn over and pull through, go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Right, and then you're going to single crochet through until you just have 2 stitches left in the row. Okay, so then you've got the 1 stitch there and the 1 stitch there. Yarn over, pull through, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, and yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Alright, so you can start to see that it's starting to suddenly go at an angle, right? So continue to do this by doing a decrease stitch in the beginning and in the end of every row, until you get to the last stitch, which is just going to be your decrease stitch in the beginning and your decrease stitch in the end. There's going to be no single crochets in between. And I will meet up with you just when that row begins. Okay, so we are to the point now where we're just going to do our last row. And the way that you can tell is going to be your last row because this is 4 stitches in it. You did 1 decrease here, and then there's 2 single crochets and another decrease here. So you know that a decrease takes 2 stitches. So if there's 4 stitches here, your last 2 are going to be in the next row. Okay, so we are going to chain 1, turn our work, go into the first stitch, yarn over, go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through all 3. Okay, now you've only got 2 stitches left, so that'll be your second decrease. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay, so then you're done with this ear flap. You can cut off your end and just chain 1 and pull all the way through and tighten to end off this ear flap. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on this side, except for we're going to have to join in. So to do that, I wrap the yarn with a little bit of a tail. I wrap it around my pointer finger twice, then I can hold it behind here, pull the top one on top of the bottom one, and again now the top one on top of the bottom one until it goes right over your finger, and then you can pull in with your yarn needle and tighten. Okay, so we're going to go exactly into this stitch because there's exactly 18 stitches from this marker to this marker. So we're going to go exactly in right where this marker is. Make sure you hold your loop down over here so that the knot does not come to the front. You want to keep it in the back. You yarn over and pull through, and then you yarn over and pull through just like your first single crochet. All right, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull your tail in over to the side and keep it on top of your work so you can crochet it right in. You won't have to sew it in later. All right, so you go for 18 stitches. You've already done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And your yarn stitch is still on top of your work there. You're crocheting it in. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and at this point you can take your bobby pin out because you know this next stitch is your last stitch. And 18. Oh, my tail's not wanting to hide in there. Let's try that again. 18. Okay, so my tail was a bit long on this one, so the tail end actually went past the point where I wanted to stop crocheting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that little piece and I'm going to trim it right beside that stitch. Okay. Most of the time you would have sewed it in somewhere over here, but I had a fairly long tail that time. Okay, so we're going to want to chain our work, turn, and then single crochet in the next 18 stitches. Again, make sure you get this first one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and when you join in, it's a tiny bit of a smaller single crochet that shows up. So that's why you want to make sure you want to count your stitches, because we technically have one more stitch left to do, and it can be easily missed there. So you make sure you go into that stitch. This one is a really tight stitch. There we are. Yarn over, pull through, and single crochet. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing again for the next 2 rounds. You're going to chain 1 and single crochet for all 18 across, so that you've got 4 rows above the edge of the 2 clip. Okay, so you have finished your 4 rows that are all 18 stitches that come above the lip of the toque, which you can do at this point, or even as soon as you've got your stitches in on both sides. You could take all your bobby pins out. They sometimes can tend to get in the way because you no longer need them. There's no point in keeping them in there. All right. So the next stitch, we're going to do the same thing as we did here. Now we're going to start doing a decrease stitch at the beginning stitch and the last stitch. All right, so chain 1, turn your work, go into the first stitch, yarn over, pull through, next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And then you single crochet until there's only 2 stitches left on the row. Okay, so there's 2 stitches left, that one and that one. Do a decrease stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the last stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Alright, so you're going to continue to do this exactly the same like the row that you just did with the decrease in the beginning and the end until you get to that last, the second last row where there's only 4 stitches, and I'll meet you at that point again. Okay, so I finished the second last row where there was 4 stitches. Now I'm going to chain, turn my work, and do the last row. And it'll just be 2 decrease stitches, right? Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Do it one more time, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through in the last stitch, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. So then you can cut your yarn, chain 1, except for pull it all the way through, and tighten. Okay, so you've had 2 ear flaps done now. Okay, this is the back and this is the front. And the reason you can tell is because you have the front being a little bit further spaced than the back. There will also be a trim edge all the way around this, so it'll come just a little bit closer as well. Okay, so we've completed our first ear piece here. Now I'll show you how to do the second one. And of course you will need to make 2 as well. So this is what it looks like. It's going to be on the side of the toque, above the ear flap, like that. Like that. Alright. So in order to make this piece, we will start with the red piece first. Pull out your red yarn, and we will start with a magic circle. Okay, and inside that magic circle we are going to single crochet 12 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay. So of course, once again, you want to pull your tail out from in between the 2 stitches there. Actually, no, it wants to come out on the side right there. Okay, so then you're going to hold on to your work with your left hand, and you're going to pull on this front string, and it will tighten the loop. And then once you've tugged that fairly snug, you want to take your tail and you want to pull on that as well. Here, so put your tail to the back. Put your loop back on the hook. And then you're going to want to single crochet into the first stitch that you did in this first round. Since there's so many little stitches, I tend to count back just to make sure I got the right one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So it is this one right here, which is going to be a little bit awkward to get into. Right there. Okay, so if it's really tight like that, what I do sometimes is I go in there with my yarn needle. It's much easier to go through, and I just kind of pull up and I stretch it so that the hook can get through. Let's try this again. Go back in. There you are. And do a single crochet. And then you're going to want to put your stitch marker here because this is the beginning of your stitches. And we're going to want to do 2 single crochets in each stitch all the way around. So we're going to be going from 12 stitches to 24 stitches. It is going to get pretty jam-packed in there, and it's going to start to curl, but that's okay. It's what it's needing to do at the moment. So we're going to need to go into that same stitch and do a second single crochet, and then all the way around do 2 single crochets in each stitch till we get, and I count as I go along because then I know I've got the 24, because at this point it's not very big and it can be easy to miss a stitch. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. Okay, so I know I've got all my stitches in there. The next round going around is going to be a non-increasing round, so we're going to put 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way around, so you'll have 24 stitches still. So that's the first one. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. Okay, so the next round is going to be an increase round again. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a single crochet in that first stitch and replace the marker. And then in the second stitch we're going to put 2 single crochets. 1 and 2, and we're going to repeat that pattern all the way around. There's going to be 1 single crochet in the next stitch, the stitch following that there's 2 single crochets, then 1 single crochet, and then 2 single crochets. Right, so 1 and 2 of them, 1 and 2 of them, 1 and 2, 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 1, and in this last stitch we're going to have 2 single crochets. So it is starting to curl, but you can easily flatten it and it stays nice and flat. Okay, so this next round is a non-increasing round, so we're going to do single crochets all the way through to the last stitch again. wrong stitch. There we are. Okay, so this is the last of that stitch, and it does continue to want to curl, but it still does lay flat. What we're going to be working on now is we're going to be working on the tail piece of the ear right here. We've gone around all that we need to do. We're going to be doing this tail piece, and then we're going to trim all the way around. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is we'll start that tail piece. Okay, so to do the tail piece, we're going to have to be going back and forth. So what we're going to have to do, first of all, we can take the bobby pin out. We no longer need it. So we can chain one and turn our work. So our first stitch is going to be a decrease stitch. So you go in, yarn over, pull through, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. And then we're going to single crochet in the next 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Then our last stitch is going to be a decrease stitch again. So you go in, you yarn over, pull through, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay, and then the next row, we're always going to have a decrease in the beginning and in the end, just like the ear flaps. So we chain, turn our work, and the first stitch is going to be a decrease. Yarn over and pull through, next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay, now we're going to single crochet in the next 8 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the last stitches here will be used for a decrease. Yarn over, pull through, next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. So chain, turn your work, decrease stitch, and single crochet in the next 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now we're going to do a decrease stitch, yarn over, pull through, that last one there, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Chain, turn your work, going to do a decrease stitch to start off with, yarn over, pull through, next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Then we're going to single crochet in the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to do a decrease stitch to end this row. Yarn over, pull through, next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. So next row, chain, turn your work, Start with a decrease stitch. And single crochet in the next 2 stitches. And then end with a decrease stitch. Okay, so you have 1 more row. Chain, turn your work. And these are just going to be 2 decrease stitches in this round. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. And then your last stitch is also a decrease stitch. Yarn over, pull through, next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Okay, so it will start to look like it more as time goes on. It has a little bit of curved edges. Okay, so that's what it looks like right now. So now we're going to do the trim all the way around, and it's going to give that softer, more smooth look around the edges. Okay, so what we can do is we can chain 1, turn your work, and then you just start single crocheting. It's a little bit hard to find out where you want to put your stitches right in the beginning, but I just remember that if you're doing one on a corner like this, do 2 in the same stitch. It makes it come around that corner nice and clean. So for these parts where you are going back and forth and not in a circle, you're just going to have to find your stitches along there. Try to make them somewhat even in distance. What I do is I like to make sure that I pull this little corner stitch right here, because then it'll pull it straight. Sometimes what it wants to do in the corner there kind of wants to pucker in a little bit. If you use that stitch right in the corner, it pulls it out and keeps a nice straight edge here. There's no corner. Okay, so then once you start getting to the point where you're in the circle, and there are regular stitches there that you can use to go all the way around. We're just putting 1 stitch all the way around. Okay, so we're getting close to the area where the circle ended and we were going back and forth in our rows. Again, make sure you get right this circle edge one right there. It'll pull that, because it kind of goes like that and goes out. It'll pull this stitch up. And it won't be so much of a curved angle there. And then once you get into the row areas again, you're just going to have to make sure you find your stitches in there. Try to make them evenly dispersed. Okay, so I'm now my last stitch. This is where we started up on top here. So in this last stitch, I want to put 2 because I'm going around a corner right here. Okay, and then I'm going to slip stitch into my first single crochet on the top there, pull right through. Excuse me. So you're going to want to leave a fairly long tail, because this tail, like on this one that I made over here, the tail is very long. This is what you're going to use to sew it in back onto the hat. Okay, so I leave a fairly long tail. I'd rather have too much yarn than not have enough when I'm sewing in. Okay, so then to lock this closed, you slip stitch through again and just pull tight. Okay. So in this way we went around. It actually ended up that the round that we started with is in the front. So I just put my crochet hook through a hole very close to where the yarn is coming out, wrap it through, and then I pull it to the back. Okay, like that. So the next step will be to add the purple circle in the middle of that piece. Okay, so now to start this purple piece in the middle, we can put this one off to the side for now. And we're going to be doing the same thing that we started off with on the red piece in regards to making that circle. We're just going to stop sooner. Right, so we start off with a magic circle. Pull through, yarn over and pull through again. There you are. Now we are going to put 12 single crochets in the magic circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so now we want to make sure the tail is off to the side. Hold your work and start pulling on this front string so it's nice and snug. Then you're going to move to the tail and you're going to pull on that one. Nice and snug. Okay. Put your hook back in the loop. Make sure your tail's in the back. Then you want to single crochet into the first stitch that you did into the magic circle. First one, put your stitch marker in. And then again, you're going to want to put 2 single crochets in each stitch around. So we're going to go from 12 stitches to 24. So there's 1, go back in there for the number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, the last one, 23, and 24. And it's starting to curl again, just like the red one, but again, it'll flatten down. The next round is a non-increasing round, so we're just going to do single crochet in all 24 stitches around. So there's the first one. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. Okay, we can flatten that out again. And part of it is just you grabbing onto it too, right? Because it's such a small little disc of yarn that it's kind of is tough to grab. Okay, so this next round is going to be an increasing round again, and the first stitch is going to have 1 single crochet in it. Put your marker back in, and then the second stitch will have 2 single crochets. And we're going to repeat that pattern all the way around until the stitch marker here. So 1 and 2. One and 2. 1, 2, 1 and 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 2, 1, and for the very last stitch on the round here, there's going to be 2 of them in here. Okay, so this is where the purple one ends. You can see that is the size that it will be. So we can remove the stitch marker at this point. And again, I'm going to leave a fairly long tail on this, not as long as the red, but that's how you sew it onto the red one, is you use your last remaining stitch or your yarn left over to sew it onto the red. And what I do to make it a smoother end is I slip stitch to this to the next stitch, pull through, and then I'm going to do one more slip stitch all the way through. And if you pull it off to the side, it has a nice soft ending, not just this stitch that's sticking up, right? Okay, so the purple piece is done. The next step will be sewing it on to the red piece. Okay, so sewing these two together, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to take this back stitch, the tail end from the purple one, and take my yarn needle, put that through there, and I am going to stitch it right through to the back of this one here so I can tie these two together, right? So this stitch is right over here, so I'm going to go to the stitch beside it and pull this one right through. That will help keep this one right in the center. So that you don't have to pin it or hold it. Okay, so you can take the yarn out of the needle. And I just tie these in a knot. It doesn't necessarily have to be pretty because it's going to be sewn right back onto the toque. You won't see the side anyway. Okay, nice and snug, tight knot. and cut your ends. As long as they don't go longer than the edge of this, you don't need to sew them in because they are going to be hidden anyway. So now that it's tied on there, it'll be easier to hold this one centered. Next thing we're going to do is going to take your purple yarn, and you're going to put that on your yarn needle. And then I tend to just make sure I visually center. Might have to twist it a little bit because even though it's tied on, you can twist it and it can be quite a bit different. So I feel like that is where it is most centered, right there. That's where I'll kind of clamp it between here. And my very first stitch, because it's coming out to the side like this, I'm actually going to go behind there and just go through that next stitch right there. And it'll pull that right back. At that point, you just sew it on. You don't want to pull too tight because then you will be making it curl, right? Okay, it seems I keep on going through the exact same stitch. Let's try this again. Okay, so you can go on the back, make sure you go onto the next stitch over, right there. There you are. Now I will continue to go forward. There's so many tails in the way there. You just want to make sure you don't get those caught in there. I'm not too concerned with how it looks in the back, but I just try to make sure that I go just right underneath the V's in the stitch there so that it's closest to the side. And there's no lips coming up on the end there. I always want to make sure you take a second glance and make sure it's centered. Continue to sew all the way around. Almost done this sewing on the purple to the red piece. A few more stitches left to go yet. Okay, so that's where we started, right there. So then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to sew this in. I'm going to knot it first around this stitch right here. Go through your loop and pull. Make sure it's not too tight and so it's causing it to pucker. Okay, and then I sew my ends in. Here I'm not sewing them in to hide them because, like I said, for these ones you don't really need to hide it if it's going to be sewn right onto the toque itself. But this is more to keep it in because this is just kind of a loop knot there, and by going back and forth it ensures that this will not go anywhere. Okay, and cut off your tail after that. And there you are. We have 2 pieces for the ears. I don't even know if they're technically his ears, but they're on the side of his head on this Baymax character. So I keep calling them ears. Maybe they are his ears. I'm not sure. Okay, so we finished 2 of them. And the next step will be sewing them on to the head. Okay, so in the previous clip I had said that we were going to be sewing these onto the toque next. That is not correct. We're actually going to make the eye applique piece first. So then we can make sure that everything is centered and we have enough space for everything. Then we can sew them on. Alright, next thing we'll do is we'll start sewing or start crocheting that eye piece. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be going over is this mask part by the eyes of the Baymax character toque. Alright, then after that we'll be doing the actual eyes, the little black circles, and they have a little line in between them. But let's get started on this item. Of course you're in the white yarn, and we just need to chain on. So we wrap around twice, top over bottom, till it comes over the finger, and tighten. Okay, so we're going to chain 28 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Okay, so now we are going to be putting single crochets in all of these. So we are going to skip the first loop and go into the second one. And we are going to single crochet in the first 13 stitches. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to start curling in on you. You just kind of have to try to work around it. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Okay, so in the next stitch we're going to be putting 2 single crochets in the same stitch. 1, 2. And then to finish off we're going to put single crochets in the last 13 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and last one, 13. Okay, it curls on itself like a pig's tail, but it will straighten out the more stitches you put on it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet all the way back. We're going to have to start going back and forth now. So we're going to chain 1, and now there's going to be 28 stitches in all, and we're going to crochet right through to the end, which is 28. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and the last one, don't miss it there, that's why I count, is 28 in that last stitch there. Okay, so we're going to do one more row just like the one we did. Single crochets all the way across, and so it's 28 stitches. First we chain, we turn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and the last stitch, 28. Okay, so this next stitch we're going to start decreasing on the ends now because it's angling towards the bottom. So we're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and the very first stitch we're going to do is going to be a decrease stitch. Okay, so you make sure you go into this first one here, yarn over, go into the next stitch, yarn over, and pull through all 3. Okay, so then we're going to crochet, single crochet in the next 24 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. And then the last stitch is going to also be a decrease. So go in, yarn over, pull through, go into the next stitch, the very last one, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Excuse me. Okay, so the next stitch is going to, the next row is going to be very similar to this one. So we're going to chain, we're going to turn our work, and the very first stitch is going to be a decrease. So you go into that first stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay, so now we're going to single crochet in the next 22 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. And then the last stitch on this row is also going to be a decrease. So you go into this stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the very last stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay, so then we're going to repeat that again. Chain, turn, first stitch is decrease, yarn over, pull through, go through next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Alright, now we're going to single crochet into the next 20 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And then again, the very last stitch is a decrease stitch, so you go into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the very last stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay, so we're going to do this again. We're going to chain, turn our work. First stitch is decrease, yarn over, pull through, next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Now we are going to single crochet in the next 18 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Last stitch is a decrease, so you go through the stitch, yarn over, pull through, go through the last stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay, so this next row will be a little different, but then yet quite similar. So we're going to chain, turn. First stitch is still a decrease stitch. Yarn over and pull through, go to the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and go through all 3 loops on your hook. Okay, so now we're going to single crochet in the next 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. and then we're going to do a decrease stitch. So it's going to go through the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, go through the stitch after that, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Okay, so the next round, we're only just working on this part now. The other little bump on the bottom, we're going to have to go in and join and finish that one. So for now, we'll finish this one. Yarn over, or sorry, not yarn over, chain and turn. And we're going to do a decrease. Yarn over, pull through. Next stitch, yarn over, pull through. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Now you're going to single crochet in the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. The last stitch is a decrease stitch. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over through the last stitch, pull through, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Okay. So I believe we have 1 more row left here on this side. So chain, turn your work. First stitch is a decrease stitch. Then you single crochet 1, and then the last stitch is a decrease stitch in the last 2 stitches there. Okay, so now we are done this part. We're going to go around and trim them all yet, but this is what we're done for now. So we can cut this off. You can make it a fairly short tail. There you are. That side is done. So now we're going to need to join back in, which means we need to get a loop on our hook. 2 times over, top over bottom, top over bottom, over the finger, and tighten. Okay, so we're going to need to join here so we can do this part on this side. Right? So we're going to go 3 stitches over, 1, 2, 3. That one right there. Make sure your yarn is on top and that your knot is on this side of the hook. It has to be on this side. Don't let it go to this side, because we are going to be starting with decrease stitch. Okay, so you hold the knot on the right side of the hook. You're going to yarn over, pull through, then you're going to go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through. Then you're going to yarn over, you can pull through all 3 loops on the hook, including the one that you first joined on there. Okay. Now we're going to single crochet in the next 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the last 2 stitches you're going to do a decrease stitch. Okay. So for the next row, you chain, you turn. First stitch is a decrease stitch. Then you single crochet in the next 3 stitches. And then the last stitch is a decrease stitch. This one might be a little bit more difficult to get into because that's where you joined. Sometimes it can be a bit tighter. Okay, one last row here. So you chain, you turn, and your first stitch is a decrease stitch. And then you have a single crochet, and then you have a decrease stitch as your last stitch on this row. Excuse me. Okay, so you can see at this point they are even. What we're going to do now is we're going to turn our work and we're going to trim all the way around to give it that finished look that this one has. Okay, so now we chain and you turn. Then you're going to want to single crochet all the way around. Some of these will have stitches that you can go into, and some of them will be kind of on the sides here where you kind of have to find your stitches to try to make them as even as possible. And remember, when you're going around a corner, to do several stitches in one stitch. Okay. Right, so we're kind of hitting a corner here, so I'm going to do 2 in the same stitch. Helps it kind of go around better. Right, and here's, you have a couple of tails, right? You're working with 3 tails. Try to sew them in or crochet them in as you go. If not, you're going to have to sew them in. Okay. Oh, that one was a bit loose. I don't like where that one was put. Okay, let's find a better home for that stitch there. Sometimes you just gotta force your hook to go into a certain spot. It's not really a stitch, but you kind of make it a stitch, and this one is proving to be extraordinarily challenging. Oh goodness. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to go into this big one here, and then it'll help me go into the smaller one right beside it. There we are. Sometimes you just gotta force your stitch in there just to make sure that it's, because you don't want a gap between your stitches. Okay, so you just continue. Now I'm covering over my first tail. You only have to do a few stitches of it. It doesn't have to be crocheted in the whole way. Like, I'm going to trim this one off here because I've already done some. And I'm getting really close to the next tail, which is right over here. So I continue to single crochet. And when I get to this corner one, I'm going to want to put 2, if not 3, in the same one. It all depends on how sharp the corner is. And it looks like 2 will be just fine. So then you continue to single crochet. While you're crocheting in the tail there. Okay, so I've crocheted several stitches over that tail already, so I'm going to cut it. And just make sure you don't cut your own, your working yarn there. And continue to single crochet. Oh. Okay, so now I'm getting to this corner, this top right corner. I'm going to want to put several in the same stitch, and I'm going to go with 3. Okay, so now my last tail is here, which I'm working in, and this is the chain on the top that you started with. That's the chain of 28, I believe it was. So now you can single crochet into the other half of that chain. Okay, now I'm going to cut the tail off here. And continue to single crochet. Okay, so we're getting close to this corner here, the top left. which we will need to put several 3 crochets into this one here that I just did. 1, 2, and 3, so that has the top loop part is kind of starting to face in the right direction. Then we will single crochet. We're almost to the point now where we started. Okay, so we started right here. I'm going to put one more stitch right here, and that's the point where I'm going to slip stitch into that first stitch that we started on. And here you want to have a nice long tail, because again you're going to use that to sew this face mask onto the toque. Okay, so nice long tail. And then to tie this off, just loop through and bring all the yarn through and tighten by pulling it. Okay, so there we are. We have completed the mask. Okay, the next thing we're going to want to do is put the little black eye pupils on there with a little line in between. So we can move this up a little bit here so it doesn't get in our way too much. And we're going to start with the black yarn here. And we just need to start with a magic circle. So you bring it over your top finger, give yourself a nice long tail, wrap it around your 2 middle fingers twice, hold them together with your thumb and your pinky. The hook goes through both of these. Pull over from behind that finger, and you do the same thing again. Then you can let it go. Okay, so we are going to want to single crochet 12 times into this magic circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and almost lost it. There we are. And 12. Okay. Pull the loop loose. You want to get your tail off to the left side. Here. You're going to pull that front string and you're going to hold on to your work here. Keep pulling until it's nice and snug. And then you're going to pull your tail. Make sure you hold your work nice and tight. Here. Okay, so this is black yarn, so it can sometimes be very difficult to see your stitch. I'm not sure how well it'll show up on camera, but my first stitch is right here. Okay. Pull my tail to the back, because it's not going to need to be bigger than 1 round. That'll be big enough, so we will be just slip stitching into that very first stitch. Oh, I only got one of the top loops that time. It is quite difficult to see on black yarn. Okay, and then you slip stitch right through. Give it a little bit of a tail. You're going to be using this to sew it on. Of course, it's tiny, so you won't need that much. And then you slip stitch again just to tie the knot. Pull it tight. Right, there you are. what I'm going to do with this tail is I'm going to bring it through to the back of this, and then I'll just tie it securely in the back there. Because there's not really much to do here. And this way I can kind of pin it in while I'm sewing it in. Okay, so we're just going to quickly do one more like that. Right, magic circle. And so 12 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Loosen the loop, bring your tail to the left. Oh, there, your tail's to the left. Hold on to your work with your left hand. With your right hand, pull on the front string. Right, until you kind of can't pull anymore with a snug pull. Pull on the tail. Nice and snug. And there you are. Put your hook back in the loop. Bring your tail to the back. And you're going to want to slip stitch to your very first single crochet. There you are. Give yourself a bit of a tail. And then do one more slip stitch, pull it all the way through, and pull to tighten. Okay, so now we do have those two eyes, and with some of the leftover yarn that I use for stitching it in, I'm going to sew a line across to meet them, and that will be what the Baymax character's eyes look like. Okay, so starting to sew the eyes in, we can start with this side. So we're going to pull this tail, put our yarn into the needle, and I am going to see exactly where I want it. I want to have the line going right through this stitch right there, because that'll be the middle of this pupil. Now I just have to make sure this is in the center of this dip as well. There it is. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to bring this through the stitch that's right below it. Accidentally pulled it out. Put the yarn back on it. And by holding it there, you can pull it. Sorry, the front piece needs to come out of the way. You can pull it so it's snug. Look at it to make sure that's what you want it to be. It'll be more important to match this one to this one afterwards than to make sure this one is absolutely perfect, because a little bit of leeway can be forgiven, right? So I'm going to make sure I'm in a stitch underneath here so that it does not show. Black and white couldn't be more opposite in color, so it would show behind there. So I want to make sure I'm staying in those stitches behind this, where this pupil is already. Okay, so I'm just gonna, and it doesn't have to be super snug, it's going to be tied in by sewing it in all the way around anyway. This is just to kind of tack it in while you're sewing it. Okay, so you can cut that tail. Now you're working with the main string. Put this one on your yarn. Oh, didn't quite get it all. There we are. Okay, again, make sure that it's centered where you want it to be. I first of all always go to the stitch behind where the yarn currently is, because that's the knot. We want to pull the knot behind it. There you are, so you won't be able to see the knot at all. Right, so then you just sew it in. It doesn't really matter where it's coming in the back, as long as it's coming in just under the V-stitch on the top side of the work. Okay, and that is my dog drinking water again. She's a very noisy drinker for a 7.5-pound dog. You just continue to sew it around along that top stitch. You started sewing right there, so sometimes you have to remember where you started sewing. Whenever you're working with black yarn, it's like the rules change. It's so hard to see stuff. Okay, so one more set of stitches here, in and out, and we will be done for sewing this one on. Okay, that is exactly where I wanted it to be, so I'm happy with that. So I am going to tie off the stitch back over here. And like the other one, it doesn't need to be, you know, lots of tie-ins, just a little bit will do. Because it needs to be just to stay behind where the pupil currently is already. There you are. So you can cut that off. And this is all going to be hidden behind there anyway, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do now is we're going to go for the second one here. Right, so we do the tail in the back first. And then we place it where we'd like to be. This one you want to make sure that you're going to start your yarn right over here, because that's where you want to put the line back and forth right in the end. You're actually going to go back towards this one here. You may as well use the yarn here rather than trying to tie in a new piece and hide that ends. Okay, so we want it in the center here. This one will look like that. Center. This will be the center. Kind of see which rows it stopped at here. It's just above this row here. Okay, so we're going to tack that in with your thumb and your fingers in the back there. You're going to see exactly where you're going to want to put this stitch in. There we are. So for this one, I'm going to do the loop, but I'm not going to cut the tail. It's going to be a little bit in the way, but you'll see why later as to why I'm not cutting the tail. I'm just leaving it free right now. Okay, so you take the long end of the yarn again, put it through your needle. Again, just make sure it's in the right spot before you start sewing in. Go into the one behind the knot first so that the knot will pull to the back. All right, so now if I didn't pull it, you'd see the knot there, eh? So then you pull it and it goes away. Okay, so then you start sewing in, going around, and now you're going to have to be careful that you're not entangling with that one back there. It's a little bit of a pain, but it's kind of a little bit of a time saver later on. Not by a huge amount, but it's those little things. Okay, come on. There you are. more stitches here. We will be back to the starting point. There we are. Okay, so now you'll see our yarn is very close together. Technically, we could have done that on this side too, just left this and then just tied them so that we don't have to worry about getting, you know, going back and forth just so that it can stay. But in this case, I'm going to be going this way and then come back this way, just so it's a nice strong line. So I'm going to start right here on the stitch right next to it, and that's the one I want to go to and meet the next one. And I'm going to skip a stitch, go to the one after that, and then you have to skip two stitches again, and you're going to come in from the back behind with this one here, and then you double back, go back to the one that you just came out from. And do the same thing again, 2 stitches forward, and then come back. Right, 2 stitches forward, and then come back. And then you're going to have to go just to this one right here, right beside the toque. There you are, or right beside the pupil. Right, and then now I am going to go just into this one here, because that one didn't have one, so it's just 1 stitch there. And then I'm going to go back to the one right beside the pupil and go right to the middle of this one here, 2 stitches over. So I'm kind of doubling up on my stitches. And then from this one is where you went in, you go 1, 2 stitches over, and go back. Just getting a nice dark black line going. And you go 1, 2 stitches over. I try to go always on the same side of the yarn. I don't want to come up on this side of the yarn once and then that side of the yarn the next time. So I'm tending to stay on top of the yarn to give it a more uniform look. Right, so then we're going to go 1, 2 stitches over. Oh, almost lost my yarn. Go back into that stitch. Right, to try to make it straight as possible. And then you're going to have to go into the stitch right next to the pupil. And then just the 1 stitch over, right? Just like over here. Okay, so they both have a double line in between. It's nice and strong. It pops quite well. So you turn it over the other way. And I am just going to bring myself back to this string here. Just make sure that wherever you're going down, it's behind the pupil here, so that the dark black yarn won't show through like right here or something, because it does show through. Okay, so you can take the needle out. Now we're just going to tie these 2 together. Make sure it's nice and flat so we're not making anything ripple. Right, and just tie it in a knot. Okay, I'm going to cut them fairly short to the knot. Okay, so the face mask is done. Both the ear parts are done. The next point is to sew them on to the toque itself. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to sew this on first. Put these to the side for now. And here's the toque. This is the front facing forward. Right, and we know that because of this. It's a little bit further towards the sides than the back pieces are. And what I do is you kind of have to hold it with your hand inside of it. Some people do this on either a wood or a foam head. That can work too. And my goal is usually for this one to have like these right here. You see how wide this is in comparison to this? So you know how far up it's going to have to be, right? So this is not quite as wide as that one. Put 2 stitches on either side. Put it up over there so that there's about 2 stitches when you go up like this. And what I do is I temporarily pin it in just with the bobby pins. I just pin it right to the back for now. You can pull it from the inside, your bobby pin. So you can see that that is about 2 stitches, right, away. So then what I like to do is I like to follow the stitch up over here. That's why we did the 2 single crochets in the 1 stitch in the middle of the first row, just so that it'll have a bit of a curve to it, right? You can kind of force a little bit more curve as you're sewing it in, but it does help. Okay, so we want it to go right there. And if we look at that, that's about 2 stitches different there as well. So I'm gonna just hook in this. I'm gonna have to put it in that one right there. I guess it's not set in stone. That's why I do it with the bobby pins. It's easy to move around. Oh, and I missed that. I should have gone a stitch higher. Right, there we are. And it's so much easier to move around this way, in the beginning at least. Okay, so we look at that. Looks to be fairly centered, but another way to find out is to flip this so that the ear flaps are equal. Then you know this is your center stitch right here. I tend to put another bobby pin there. Then I know what the center of my front is. If I look at that, if I make it point straight up, it is pointing to the center of this hump right there. Okay, so then I will take another bobby pin and just kind of go through the white first, and then you go through, right, and you go through the red part of the toque. Can always move it around, and this is kind of just a temporary tack, right? Because we're going to start sewing it in here, and then we can make sure that we're staying straight and we're not having too much kind of yarn that's going to have to pucker up later on in order to make it work. So just make sure that you're keeping an eye on it all the time. I just don't like to use needles, like the sewing needles, to tack it on, because I'm going to poke myself about 20 times doing that. I'm just the most unlucky person in regards to using sewing pins, so I found other ways to make it work. Okay, so we're going to start sewing it in now. One last look. I don't want it to go above the toque too much. Right when it's kind of at its last point of curving, that's where I want to put the eyes and the face. If you put it too high up here, it doesn't show when you're looking straight at someone. And this one, this is all there is here. There's going to be the side pieces, but there's nothing like a nose or a mouth to add underneath it, so I think that's a very good spot. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to now put this needle straight in below here so that I can hide that knot. And there we are. I can go over to the next stitch, pull it in. You want to make sure it's always sitting flat, that there's no points that are bubbling up very much. And if this is supposed to be a straight end here, you can use your straight rows to keep things straight, right, until it needs to curve up. So even then I wanted to go below it, but I go and I pull them, rather than going below, I go and make sure I pull that stitch down so it will be straight. And I have done the silliest thing. Let's pull that out. Every once in a while I do that. Easy fix though. Put yarn back onto the needle. Maybe not so easy after all. Okay, yarn back on the needle. So now we need to go from the front down. There we are. Just remember the bobby pin is right here. So as you're pulling yarn in and out, it's going to be sticking here. I try to keep it there as long as possible so that it can keep exactly where it's supposed to be. Okay, so the next stitch is right there. Now we're starting to go up the side. Keeping that bobby pin out of the way behind there. Go back down. Making sure you're not going into the exact same stitch that you went into. Sometimes it feels like you are, because it's hard to see sometimes where your stitch disappeared in the previous one. Okay, I'm going to go one more stitch before I remove the bobby pin that's right there. That. Now at this point I want to make sure that this is staying flat and it's even to the point of this. I don't want it all of a sudden to be too tight here and then have this problem right like that there. So make sure you're staying even, make sure this row is equal with that one down over there. And now we start going back down again. Just try to make sure that this is as even as can be. Sometimes you kind of need to go in and you need to pull it back to make it even. Because I know this row is going to have to go down. I sewed it into this row right here. That's going to have to go right there. So let's kind of help it get there by starting to stretch it a little bit now. There. Okay, that one might be a little bit too much. There we are. Okay, so we are sewing it right into the same row now for this bottom row, which is good news. It's always good to try to make it even, and those stitches are an excellent use of helping you make sure that your appliques are sewed on straight. And I go into every single stitch, every single crochet stitch I sew in, because when you're washing it, some kids are much rougher than others. And sometimes if you've just got one little weak stitch in there, you want to make sure it doesn't have the room to kind of lift up, right? Okay, so I'm sure you get the point at this point. in regards to how to sew it on. Just make sure you're keeping a close eye on the fact that it's symmetrical and that there's no points where it's going to pucker up like that. Just keep it straight, keep flattening it, and I will see you at the point where I am finishing sewing this eye mask part on. Okay, so I have finished sewing on the face mask part. I end up with my stitch in the back. So I'm just going to need to tie it off and then sew in my ends. Because this is all behind the mask, you won't see the white yarn showing through the red. You also want to make sure there's no knots like this that are really bumping up quite a bit. You want to make sure you pull them nice and tight so that they're nice and flat underneath there, so that they won't cause irritation for the wearer. Trim off your ends. Right, and there you are. The face mask is done. Alright, the next step will be attaching the two earpieces on the side. Okay, so this is the earpiece. I've done one little bobby pin to tack it in, but I realized I forgot one thing. We always have the tail ends here that we're going to use for sewing in. I did this when I originally created the design, and it seems I've done it again. But we're not sewing this in back over here, because this is actually going to be sticking up. We're going to be sewing it in at this point, all the way around like the circle that the red is. We're not going to go up past the wings here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just thread my needle through there. You can do that before you have it pinned to the toque. It will probably be easier. Okay, since I only have one pin in there, I can kind of pivot it around. And I'm just going to go in through there so that the knot, I have to go through the back first, so that the knot pulls to the back and not to the front. Right, there we are. I'm just going to go between the stitches here. I've made this toque several times now, and every time I do the exact same mistake. But at least then I know you can't see it at all. It's just a silly mistake in the design on my part. Okay, so then this last one, I'm going to bring it up right here, because this is where the circle is starting already. I'm going to sew it in. It's going to be sewn in all along here. Okay, so now you can pin it in. What I do is, I make sure that the center of the purple circle is centered with these last two stitches on the bottom here. Right, so then I tack that in there, and then I make sure it goes at like a 45-degree angle as well. Then I make sure that this circle is matched up to very close, just below the center of the pupil, is what the goal is. And I am going to tack in this top one. That's a good angle. You can make the other ear match this one. This one we just want to make sure is centered. Here we are, so I've tacked one up here and one down there. Okay, and I'm just gonna, since I went down here, I'm just continuing to go around here, and then we'll meet up over here. Excuse me. Okay, so my needle is still attached to my thread, I'm hoping. There it is. Okay, so again, just like when you're doing the face, just make sure you're kind of pressing it down every now and again, just to make sure that you're keeping it flat. And I go into the first stitch and start to sew it in. Try to get as close as I can to the bobby pin so that I have as many stitches as I can before I have to take it out. Now I'm going to be going straight into the stitch where the bobby pin is now. So now I can take it out. Right. Sometimes it's hard to see when you're doing the same color. Okay. Here. And I'll end up twisting the toque around and whatever is most advantageous to the angle that you want to get. I tend to spin it around a little, so sorry if that is distracting. We're kind of starting to get close to that bobby pin on the top there now, so it's starting to get a little bit in the way, so we have to make sure you stop your yarn from tangling in it when you're pulling it back and forth. Okay, so this is the last stitch now before I have to take this bobby pin out. Should definitely stay where it's supposed to. You've sewn all the way along here. But again, just make sure you continue to flatten down where you're going to be sewing it on. And also make sure you're keeping an eye out for when you're going to have to turn here, right? Because you don't want to sew this all on. They're supposed to be sticking up and be free like that. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for when you're going to be turning there. Right, and I am gonna, this is my last stitch in the loop that I am going to do before I start crossing over here now. Okay. Then just make sure you pick a line for which stitch you're going by. I'm going to be going right along this one here. So then you can stick with that and it's got a straight line to it. Then the ears will sit as good as possible. Okay, so we are almost finished putting the first ear on. Make sure you get yourself back to the edge there. You can always put an extra couple of stitches, right? So I'm going to be coming out right over here on the edge, and then I'm just going to go back in one more time so that I can tie back in the back of the toque. Okay, so then you can see this, they can still stick out. Can go flat if they want it to, but this is the design of the pattern, is to have it stick straight out like that. Okay, so we're going to go in and we're going to tie in our ends. And like always, you want to make sure that you do it in a way that provides the least amount of kind of bump up, right? So that it's not causing itchiness or discomfort for the wearer. Okay. Now let's tie it in. Cut the end off. Okay, and the first ear is on. So you've got the face and the eyes, you've got the first ear. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to put the second ear on. Make sure you're matching it in regards to height, the same height. In regards, you can always use the center of the circle of the purple one to kind of mark how high it is, and also center the circle above the 2 stitches that are the final one in the ear flap. Alright, and once you've done sewing that on, I will meet you at the end and we can do the trim. Okay, so we have finished both ears now. Attach them on. And of course the face mask is on as well. What you can do next is, if you want to sew in your tail here, if you haven't done that yet, you can do that. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a different step in this one. You can do this as well. But what I did is I did a second toque. I did it one size smaller than this toque. So what happens is they fit right inside of each other. The customer has requested to have an even warmer toque. And I find that lining toques that have been crocheted is a little different, a little difficult. And my sewing machine is broken. But it is difficult to do because the thread, when you put it along the end here, if this would be the lining, it does not stretch as much as the yarn does. And the toque cannot be as flexible on the end, and it doesn't stretch as the owner wears it. So I actually kind of like this better. So it's the toque, the same thing on the pattern in the beginning, that increase chart that I had in the beginning of this video. I just did one size smaller than this. So I went around 14 for the outside toque, and you would just do one size smaller for the inside toque. Right, and then you have double layered toque, and they are super, 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 super warm, which is great for Manitoba winters, because Manitoba, Canada is freakishly cold in the winter. Alright, so instead of sewing in that tail end, what I'm going to be doing is I am going to be taking that end, I'm going to be taking the needle, and rather than sewing it in, I am going to be pulling it through the very top, like this. It's just to the side there. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's where it is. So I'm going to go just on one of the side, right in through the center there. Excuse me. and then I'm going to straighten it out. Right, I've made sure that my ear flaps are matching. What I do in this case then is I make sure that the inside toque is the size that the customer wants, that fits the head size that I'm going for, and then I just go one size higher. So I actually make the inside toque first, and then I make the outside toque, and then I do all the applique stuff on top, and then I sew them together. And when I say sew them together, I mean crochet them together by doing the trimming. When I tie these two together, bringing one tail into the inside one, the outside's tail into the inside's toque's tail, then I can tie them together so it's nice and snug on the top. It's not going to move or shift on the top. Plus they'll be joined all the way along here, so then it won't move anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to just tie that end in. Right, with a nice knot. And then before I sew them in this case, I'm going to leave them there, but I'm going to do these edges first. I'm going to sew them all in, because then I can pull it inside out. I can sew these in, and I don't have to worry about accidentally kind of tying them in the wrong place. And everything is snug and together where it should be. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing next. We'll be doing the trimming. Okay, to start the trimming, we don't need to worry about any of our tails. We can crochet those all in. If you want to sew them in, that's fine. But if I'm crocheting there anyway, may as well just crochet right over them and make them go in that way. Okay, so we're going to take our regular size crochet hook that we've been using all along, and we need to get a hook on, get a loop on the hook. So we'll go over twice, top over bottom, till it goes over the end of the finger. Put the hook in and tighten. Okay, so I usually start the trimming in the back. In my case, I'm going to always be making sure that my ear flaps are matching up here. If you're only doing a single layer, you don't need to worry about that. There's going to be a few extra stitches on the outside than there will be on the inside for this, just because there's less space to cover for the inside toque. You just kind of have to play that by ear. I just want to make sure that I go into every stitch on the outside here. That may mean going into the same stitch on the inside toque a couple of times, but you'll never see it. You'll never notice it. Okay, so we are going to go in the center and just go into the stitch behind it as well. Then I'm going to make sure my knot and my tail are on the right side of my hook. And I'm going to yarn over, pull through, and yarn over for my first single crochet. Then I bring my tail back over my work right here, and then I single crochet while I keep my tail in as well underneath these single crochets. So a lot of people won't need to do the double layer toque. There's a few of my clients who ask for it. I've made double layer toques for my nephews. It depends. Depends what you're going for. Is this the toque that you're going to be outside a lot in? That they'll be playing and needing that warmth for several hours. And if it's a really cold day like January and February, usually very cold here, then you're going to want a bit of a warmer toque. Okay, so it does take a little bit more work to put them both together, but it is much easier than sewing and aligning, in my opinion, because thread cannot imitate the elasticity of yarn the same, and it always lands up getting very snug right around the forehead, right where the top of the toque is, or sorry, the bottom of the toque right by the eyebrows, just because the thread can't stretch, And then if they make it stretch, the thread breaks and the lining comes out, and I am sure there is a better way to do it, but I just had a standard sewing machine, which now just needs some repairs, and it just didn't work well. Okay, so I'm going to cut my tail off now, making sure it's the tail you're cutting off, not the yarn to the yarn ball. And now I can continue to crochet in here. Okay. So if you're just doing the single lining or the single toque, you're not going for the double toque, it will be a lot easier and faster. But when you look at it from the outside, you just can't tell that it's a double lined toque. It doesn't look any funnier on the bottom stitch here. Okay, so make sure you don't go into this corner stitch. Go into the first stitch of the ear flap and then work your way up. I've made sure that I've done my ear flaps the exact same size. The amount of stitches, everything is exactly the same on both toques, so that when I'm sewing them in, that's a little bit too much of a break there in between stitches. You just want to make sure you have them evenly spaced so you don't have a big old gap from one stitch to the next. Sometimes you just gotta make your own stitches then. There we are. So by having the ear flaps be exactly the same size, this part should be very simple. As long as you're keeping your pieces equal on the back, it will be no different. See, again, there's a space there in between stitches. You don't want to do that. But for me, doing the two toques together, I have made it just a little bit more challenging for myself to do a very nice clean edge. Alright, so doing this edge is pretty much exactly the same as when you're putting the edge around your face piece. Just making sure you have a nice even distance between stitches, no gaps. If you're going around a corner, do several in the same stitch. Same thing applies. So what you'll do is you'll continue to go over and around up to the point where you meet where you started. Just remember never to do the corner stitches right in the corner. Go off to the side, either the first stitch on the toque or the first stitch on the ear flap. That'll bring it in rather than make it pucker out because it's got an extra stitch in there. Okay, so I will meet you when we get to the last stitch there and we meet up with where we started. Okay, so we have finished our single crochets for the trim all the way around. Now we just finished our last stitch here. And what we're going to do is we are going to slip stitch into the very first stitch here that you did. You pull right through and you can cut your tail off. There we are. Now we're just going to quickly sew that tail in. And pull it just until that knot comes behind the stitch. You don't want to pull it too tight, otherwise it's going to pull right in and there's going to be a spot there that's obvious that it's pulled too tight. And you go back and then you cut off your edges. Okay. So there is the toque. When it lays flat, it wants to kind of go back here, but it does sit up like this if it's not pressed back on right away. Okay, so I'm going to quickly sew in my ends up here, which I'm sure most of you have already done, because the majority of people don't make double toques, maybe more than I think, but out here I make them a little bit more often because, like I said, it's cold here. Okay, so then the next step we'll be doing is we'll be adding these strings right here. That'll be braided, and so that the toque can be tied underneath the chin. And that will be the last step. Okay, so what we're going to be working on now is the braided tie pieces that go on right here. So what I do is I usually make them 36 inches long. And it's not that it'll be that long, but it's actually half of that, right? Because you're going to, if this were the yarn, it would go this way, it would go through the toque right here, and then it would end at the same point here. What I do, the reason why I do that is, why I do it a little bit longer, is because you're going to lose a little bit of length when you're braiding it over. You lose a little bit of your length that way, and you can also cut it shorter if you want to. You can't make it longer at that point, and then you've wasted 18 strings that way. So I'd rather waste a little bit more by having them longer, and I can trim them shorter, or if I just want them longer, if the kids are older, there's not as much danger of them tripping on it or, you know, getting it stuck in something. So this one can be a bit longer then. So like I said, I'm going to do them at 36 inches. I just have a fabric measuring tape that I use that here for. So the way that I do that is get a good chunk of yarn and I pin the top in with my finger here and just bring it along until I hit 36. Okay, so now I don't have to use the measuring tape for every one past that, right? I can put that off to the side. So I know I have that 36 inches long, and when this is going to be closer to the length that it's going to be. Minus, usually loses about an inch or so in the braiding. Plus you can have longer tassels or shorter. You get some options then. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sample that I just measured out, that yarn, and this is the yarn going back to my yarn ball. So then I'm just going to bring it right to the end here. So then I know that that is 2. We need 18 of these for this side, 18 each side. So this is 3. They'll end up being a little bit different in size because the yarn just stretches differently as you go along, but I'm not too worried about a little bit difference in length because you usually trim a bit off anyway. So we've got 3. Now we're going for 4. 5. 6. 7. Pulled that one a little bit so it actually isn't as long as it looks. We've got 1, not counting this one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8. My scissors are getting dull there. Okay, so we've done 8 of them. We're going to need 18 for each side. So what I'll get you to do is I'll get you to make 18 2 sets of 18 strings at 36 inches long. And I'll meet up with you then. Okay, so here are 2 sets of 18 strings at 36 inches each. Another thing that you'll have to cut, but only 2 of these, and these are going to be the pieces that you tie your braid with after it's been braided on the bottom. You want to be able to have something pre-cut already, because once you're braiding and then you've got to go cut something, very often your braid wants to loosen up a little bit. So I usually do about that long, and I make 2 of them. Right, and then just snip it right on the end. So you've got 2 strings about that long. And then you are done with your yarn that you need to cut. Okay, the next thing we'll do is we'll show you how to attach them to the toque. Okay, so for attaching these strings to the toque, you can put 1 set aside, both the 18 strings and also one of the tie pieces as well. Keep the other tie piece close by. And for this one, you're going to want to split it in 2. Right, so that'll be 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so you've got them split into 2 separate pieces. And then you want to make sure that they're as close as possible, can all be the same length. It's not, you just don't want any that are much shorter than the rest. Okay. Pull that through. Okay, so they all seem to be pretty good. So then you're going to take your toque. This side here. It's going to be a little bit of a tight squeeze to get these in. It always is. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to stick your crochet hook either from the front or from the back in that same stitch. I usually use the same stitch where I did the 3 single crochets to make the corner. That's usually the stitch that I use, because I'll use 1 here and 1 there, because I'm going to be splitting it. That's why I split it in half. Half of them are going to go through this hole, half of them are going to go through that stitch right there. And they will fit, believe me. Okay. So I just put it over my finger, like this, so that I can hook them onto the loop as much as possible. Realize they don't all fit perfectly on there, but if you put it nice and tight, they will pull through. Sometimes you have to go back and get a couple of stragglers that don't come through. Okay. Pull them on really tight and then pull through the toque. Sometimes you have a bigger stitch here than others. Other times, this one is very snug. Okay, so you pull through, and then you'll need to pull the one side through. Just so that they're all in there. Then I even them out and just temporarily put it in there like that. Excuse me. Okay, so then you're gonna have to do the same thing for the other half. Alright, so you want to make sure there's none that are way shorter than the rest. Although they could move and shift while you're trying to get them through, but kind of like to do this first, and it kind of helps it a little bit stay in shape and kind of with each other a little bit better. Okay, so I don't fold it over too far away from the edge. Once they're all through, then you can pull them back and forth however you want. Okay, so you put that under the hook, make it really tight. First you have to go through the hole, right? This hole seems to be a little bit bigger, hoping that it'll be a bit easier to get it through. Okay, so then you hook all your yarn through and you pull. That was definitely a lot easier. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to end up There's some that are quite a bit shorter, so I match up with those. I don't match up with the longest ones. Okay, so then we've got this. Has a big braid here. Not a braid yet, but it's a braid to be. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to take 6 of the yarn from both the front and the back. So make sure you're grabbing one from the front and one from the back, and you separate them into groups of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They may not be all the same strings, but you're not going to be pulling onto them individually. So when you pull them on as a whole, especially when you start braiding, they won't shift. Okay, so then we go to the left hand side and do the same thing there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I try to naturally pick the ones that are closer to the side anyway. So then we should have 12 total here, right? 6 from the front and 6 from the back. So let's double count here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So you know you haven't miscounted anywhere. I know it's only counting to 6, but amazing how many times that happens, eh? Okay, so then you want to grab these and you want to begin to start to braid. Just make sure there's no loops or bubbles anywhere in the yarn. There's not one that's really quite a bit looser than the rest. And then you just braid. I do a fairly tight braid. Not as tight as it could possibly be, but good and snug. And what you could do as well, you could have done some of the strings in purple or white. For some of my toques, I kind of add the different colors that are in the toque and put it in the tassels. For this one, I've chosen to do all red. See, and this braid will seem very long at first. It's a lot of string, so you want to make sure you're constantly keeping your strings separate. Right, there we are. And you can see these tassels are fairly long. Like I said, it depends on the age. Like once they reach 4 or 5 years old, they're not going to be necessarily tripping on just a little bit longer of a tassel. And then you also have more room to actually tie it. If it's a younger toque, like an infant or a preemie, I do about half the amount of strings in here, and it's a much narrower braid, and it's also shorter. Just long enough so that you can comfortably tie it up under the chin. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop the braid here. You can see I have some of my shortest strings coming up here. So I'm going to stop it right here, and I'm going to grab my piece, and I'm going to put it underneath my 3 fingers here while I'm still pinching the braid. And then I can go around and I can wrap it nice and tight because it's stuck between this finger, right? So I'm going to want to put the knot in the back. Right. That one's a bit longer, so I can bring that one around one more time. And then I'm going to want to knot it right in the back. Oh, if I can. Sometimes it gets really awkward to tie it because they're all the same looking strings, right? And tie it into a knot. Okay, so those are nice and tight there. Okay, so that's your first braid. Excuse me. What you're going to do is you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Don't trim this off yet, because we just want to make sure it's going to match up. And I'll meet up with you just before I tie off the next tassel. Okay, so I have braided the second tassel. And at this point, I go and I measure, kind of compare the two lengths so that I can put the tail end at the same spot, right? So these can go up over here and then over here. So it's going to be just around this spot. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because it'll be difficult to notice if it's not, but you want it to be close, right? So again, you put this around in your fingers here and you clamp it between your pointy finger and the rest of your fingers with a couple of inches to spare. And then you start wrapping it around really tight. Right. And I will do one more this way. And I will tie them together. I usually make the strings a bit longer is what I'm realizing as I'm doing this, but it does still work perfectly fine. Okay, so you have your two tassels. Right over here, they are done. So your toque doesn't quite even fit all in frame, but this is basically the toque right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim the tassels. We want to make them all even. You want to make sure you don't do it any longer than the shortest edge, which seems to be this one right here. So kind of just pull it straight and just cut on the other end of my fingers just like a haircut. And I realize I could have much better scissors for this. This is the only time I ever think about that. So therefore I'm still stuck with my little mini orange scissors. Okay, your ends. So there is one tassel. And then you want to do the same thing here. You want to measure. Make sure that you're getting them approximately the same length, right? Do it with my other hand so that I can cut. Keep the tied ends at the same point. And there we are. Ends can go away. And there you are. So congratulations to you. You have finished the Baymax Toque. Alright, there is Baymax ears and the face. You've got ear flaps. As I mentioned earlier, I've done mine in a double toque, so it's a little bit thicker, but you can definitely do it in a single toque as well. Everything else still applies. Okay, you've got the nice braided edges. Right, and there you are. Congratulations, you are done. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I would be really grateful if you would like this video, and if you would even be so kind as to subscribe to my channel, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Bye.